Welcome back to another episode of Till the Wheels Fall Off. I'm Matt.
I'm Paige.
We've got an excellent topic in store for you today. Today we are bringing on Dr. Jake Porter. He is a renowned expert in relational and betrayal trauma, specializes in helping couples navigate the complex challenges of recovery and healing after addiction and infidelity. As a licensed professional counselor and certified sex addiction therapist, Dr. Porter combines cutting-edge research, deep empathy, and practical strategies to guide individuals and relationships toward lasting transformation. With a focus on neuroscience, emotional intimacy, and the unique impact of betrayal, his work has helped countless couples rebuild trust, connection, and hope. In this episode, listeners can expect to learn and gain insights into the complexities of sex and pornography addiction, its impact on relationships, the neuroscience behind betrayal trauma, it's a part you're really going to want to listen to, and the role of empathy and accountability in healing, and practical steps for navigating recovery and rebuilding trust. It's going to be a really great episode. We haven't covered this before because, frankly, neither of us have experience, so we brought in someone who has the most experience in dealing with this. Okay, but first, a couple of house cleaning items. I finally got merch taken care of. We finally restocked crew necks and sweatshirts. Right now, there is an issue, though, for Canadian listeners. There is a strike of some kind of labor disagreement. They are picketing up there, and they are not allowing us to ship. So if you are a Canadian listener and you want to ship something, just contact us, shoot us an email, and we will find a private courier, give you a quote and everything else. All that can be found at our website, www.twfo.com. You can also find our community there, our free Facebook community, where you can connect with thousands of other wheelies, people that are going through this, listeners of the show, people that are navigating addiction, whether that's an active recovery, if you've left a relationship, if you were trying to rebuild trust and understand how to navigate the rough and choppy waters of recovery, you can connect with other people there. And sometimes it's enough just not feel so alone in it. We've also got a course. If you've been listening to the show for a while and you've wondered, how in the world do I get what they got, or some version of that, or find hope in my relationship? We built a course called Independently Strong with Dr. Christopher Taylor. This is an alternative to things like Al-Anon that are out there you might be familiar with. And it's a program that offers hope for those that want to rebuild the relationship, and that shows what real recovery looks like and how a healthy, equal partnership can be restored. At the same time, we support and recognize that not every relationship can be saved. Sometimes things can get totaled, just like a car. We recognize that. We help you gain strength to leave if necessary, but from a place of empowerment and confidence, not fear or misunderstanding. You can find out more by going to our website or directly to independentlystrong.com, and Wheelies get a 75% discount using the code Wheelies75. Again, that's Wheelies with an S, 75 at checkout. Lastly, we've got a sponsor for today's show, excellent sponsor, Soberlink. If you don't know what Soberlink is, it is, think of it as a really high-tech breathalyzer. Okay, this is something you keep in your pocket. It's got facial recognition technology, and it is tamper-proof, and it has an online portal where you can set up things like sober contacts. If you've got a sober circle, a sobriety circle, and you're trying to rebuild trust in your relationship, if you've been a chronic relapser, if you've been through treatment several times and you're kind of on your last leg, if you will, this is a great way that you can show people that you're serious this time. This is also amazing for couples that are dealing with custody battles. It is court admissible in all 50 states and Canada. It offers proofs of sobriety when it really matters. And it is, like I mentioned, tamper-proof. If you try to mess with this thing, they will know. All the tricks that you've heard about breathalyzers do not work on Soberlink. It's got, so in the facial recognition technology, a lot of times you could have like a friend blow in it, or you could like suck on it, or there's all kinds of tricks that people have. It's not going to work because it's going to verify who's blowing in this thing. It has government grade facial recognition technology, and it has a 24/7 standby staff and they're reviewing this stuff all the time. They know when someone is actually drinking versus when someone has used cologne, or they've just eaten something that might set off a cheaper, lesser version of this. They know, they can tell the difference, and it will not send a negative, or was it positive or negative if you blew in this? It'd be a positive test, I guess, right? Positive test to all your family and friends. They will give you the opportunity to wait a moment, blow again. It is the gold standard as far as breathalyzers are concerned. So if you're looking for accountability and peace of mind, visit soberlink.com/wheels to sign up and get $50 off of a device. Again, that's soberlink.com/wheels. And now on to the show. And this is one that we've been looking forward to for quite some time. Dr. Porter, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show. And just give me a bit of a rundown how you found yourself in this space real quick.
Sure. Well, thank you, Matt and Paige, for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've been doing this work professionally since 2013. I was doing this work personally for about 4 years before that. So I'm in recovery myself. I'm a recovering, identify as a recovering sex and love addict, although I hate the term love addiction. But that's the primary 12-step program that I worked was SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And so I used to be a pastor. So I was a pastor, and I got into recovery, and I did recovery myself for a few years. And then I got fired by my therapist, who said, you should be doing this work professionally. Go get more training and then come work with me. And so that's what I did. I got another master's degree, and I became a certified sex addiction therapist and a bunch of other trainings. And started doing this work. In 2017, I left pastoring and began doing this work full time. So that's how I got here.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into the meat potatoes of the show. How do you define sex addiction?
So sex addiction is, it's a process addiction or a behavioral addiction, right? So in contrast to, say, a substance addiction or a chemical addiction. And so think about it like gambling, right? People who are gambling addicts, they don't gamble in a compulsive way because they're addicted to winning, because then there wouldn't be very many gambling addicts.
Right.
But the something in the routine, in the process of pulling that lever or placing that bet or drawing that card, is compelling them to do it to an extent that they spend more than they intend in terms of dollars and time. They continue despite harmful consequences to themselves. They do it despite it damaging their own relationships or getting in the way of their work. They find themselves needing higher levels of intensity or more in order to reach the same sort of feeling of fulfillment or rush or whatever. It's all the same marks of other addictions. Okay, it's just that sex is the behavior that those compulsions or those addictive impulses are driving the person toward. So a sex addict is not someone who likes sex. It's actually really sad, because sex addicts often actually hate sex. They may not even be aware that that's the case, but what happens is the moment they actually act out sexually, they're filled with shame and despair. And so what the addictive element is the lead up to it. It's the promise that this time will be different. This will be the one. And there's this, it's like this, or this will be the last time, and then I'll stop. All those distorted thoughts that can happen with any addiction. But then the moment I actually cross that line and I act out, then it's shame, despair, hopelessness, all of that.
Okay, I have a question about diagnosing someone as a sex addict, because you've answered part of it there. It's not just someone who likes sex, so not just someone with a high sex drive or high libido. It's not just someone who has been through infidelity in a relationship. Is there an acid test for sex addiction? Like from, example, like for alcoholism, for instance, like 12-step communities, a lot of the times if someone's unsure, they will say, well, why don't you go try some controlled drinking, and then we'll see how that goes. And you can usually tell pretty quick. Is there something similar for sex addicts when you're diagnosing this? How do you diagnose it?
So, there are some like standard measures out there that we can have people take. There's something called the SAST, which is the Sexual Addiction Screening Test. There are 10 diagnostic criteria that we can talk through, and if you have 3 of them, that reaches the threshold for the diagnosis. So there are those sorts of standard measures. There's one called the CSB D, compulsive sexual behavior disorder inventory, CSBD 19. And you can find these things online if someone's interested. But often it is, there is, like, as we're doing intake with people, there is, in their history, we'll ask them, like, have you ever tried to stop and failed? Right? Have you repeatedly failed to resist sexual impulses to engage in specific sexual behavior? That's the question. And many, many times they say yes. Okay, well, tell me about those times. And again, you could swap out, sex with alcohol or, whatever the chemical is, and it's very similar dynamics around it.
I have a question. This is debated, I think, and there's like two opposing, I guess, wormholes that for whatever reason my algorithm dives into, and it's like the manosphere of TikTok, and then there's like, so we share a TikTok account, so I get like feminist content and I get like the manosphere content. It's wild. It's a wild algorithm. But something I see people battling in the comments a lot when it comes to sex addiction, if there's a video about it, men will often say sex is a need. It's a biological need. Is that true?
I'm yet to meet someone who died from lack of sex.
Right, like water, food, or...
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. Here's a question, and people, different cultures, values, whatever, so I don't want to like impose these values on other people, but, a question that I often ask folks in this debate is, well, if you're, and this is going to get real morbid, real dark, real quick, so sorry, just heads up here.
Good. It's all right.
But like, let's say, God forbid, Paige is in a terrible accident. She can't ever have sex with you again. What's going to happen?
Right.
So there's really two answers to the question: is sex a need? There's the answer, if we want to look at this evolutionarily as a species, sure, sex is a need if the human species is going to continue on this planet. Is it a need for any one individual? No. I mean, you're not going to die. Now, I think that is not to say it's not important and meaningful and something that enriches our lives and something that we should value and celebrate and protect and cultivate and all of that. So, let's stay in a place of nuance here. It's not all or nothing, black and white, but if we're gonna be black and white about the question, is it a need or not? No, not to any one person individually.
I think there's so much behind that too. I think oftentimes, and this is just my opinion on it, it seems like it can be cultural to some degree. Like I was reading a study, I cannot remember who did it. I probably shouldn't even reference it since I can't cite it, but there was it talked about gender roles, and it talked about sex addiction and how it's very prevalent in faith-based spaces.
Yeah.
So is that because there's a higher instance of it in that population, or does the morality of sex come up more in these types of spaces? Because it is part of the moral fiber of religion, if you will. Yeah.
So I think the answer to that is both, and I've looked at the research on this pretty extensively. So I think both of the things you named are critical there. I'm going to start with the second one you named around sort of the moral standards, right? So in my clinic, Daring Ventures, we get lots of people from all over the world actually apply to come and work with us and do intensives here with us, and we work with folks online. And it is not unusual for someone to, reach out for support, and they say, well, I'm a sex addict. And then we actually do the assessments, and they are not sex addicts. But they're super religious, okay? And they think the fact that, 4 times a year they view pornography makes them a sex addict. Because they just can't stop 4 times a year. I'm sorry, that does not... clinically, that is not addiction. There is not a hijacked dopaminergic reward system involved in looking at porn 4 times a year. Okay, now, is it problematic? I mean, if it's causing you distress, if you're doing it despite not wanting to, if you're doing it in secret from your partner, yeah, then that's problematic. Okay, so there's this larger umbrella that we would call problematic sexual behaviors. Sex addiction is one category underneath that. Okay, so the sort of the moral standards in a lot of religious communities can make people think they're addicts when clinically they don't reach that threshold. However, let's talk about the first potential scenario you laid out, which is there just a higher instance of sex addiction in these communities? Yes, there is, because of, and I cannot think of the exact name of the effect from the study, but it's basically, research shows that the more you try to constrict something through sheer like impulse control, the more there's a backlash. In fact, it may be something backlash effect or something like that. And there's several studies. There's been studies of this with Christian men, with Jewish adolescents, so across different populations. But when you really clamp down on any behavior or use of any sort of substance, there's a backlash effect. And so I think what's happening in a lot of religious cultures is, if you look at the actual like doctrine or the actual teaching, they'll say things like, oh, sex is a beautiful gift from God. Sex is a good thing. But in practice, they treat it like, well, let me put it this way. My sister, back when I was in college, my sister was in high school. She was in this play, and it was about this real backwoods sort of Southern family. And she had this line in the play that just always stuck with me. She said, the preacher told me that sex is a dirty, disgusting, horrible thing, and you should save it for someone you love very much. I was like, that's it. That's it, right? So if you've got like this conflicting message of where, oh, it's a beautiful thing, but treat it like the plague, there's going to be a backlash probably.
Yeah, and that backlash effect, I mean, I think that we've all seen that. We all went to school with a guy or a girl who had an extremely strict upbringing, and they weren't allowed to do anything. And what happens the moment they leave the house? We've all seen that story play out. They go nuts.
Yeah.
They go nuts, right? Because they've been told this is bad.
This is
you need
wrong.
to hold on to this. Keep it away. Awful. It just makes you more curious in some ways. That's interesting that there's a higher instance of it. And that kind of gets me into my next question about sex addiction and pornography. I see, and this is kind of back to my first question in a way as well. I see a lot of folks being diagnosed with things, like everything's pathologized these days, especially on social media. People are diagnosing themselves autistic on TikTok right now. It's all over the place. And so I see a lot of creators who will diagnose their husband a sex addict because they caught them viewing pornography. And pornography comes up a lot, right? Some people almost use it as the acid test. If your loved one looks at pornography, chances are they are a sex addict. And I see people being labeled as sex addicts. I'm not sure that's fair. So when it comes to pornography, is there a healthy level of pornography? Is this something that just runs rampant with sex addicts? Is there a right and a wrong way to look at pornography? Let's talk about that for a moment.
So, I talked about this sort of broader umbrella of problematic sexual behavior, and then underneath that, you've got sex addiction. Well, you could even go within that, and there's, I don't even know how many we're up to now, 16 subtypes of sex addiction or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, all these different types of sex addiction. And so pornography use would be one subtype. And even within that, you could break it down even further into genres of pornography, and is it always paired with masturbation, and all this kind of stuff. So all this is how I conceptualize of it. All pornography addiction is sex addiction, but not all sex addiction is pornography addiction. Okay? But I will also say not all pornography use is pornography addiction. So just like with drinking alcohol, right? You can have something called problematic drinking, but not go to the level of full-blown alcoholism.
Sure.
Right? In the same way, you can have problematic use of pornography without it rising to the level of pornography addiction. Okay. And so how do you know if it's okay or not? Well, I want to give two answers to this. I want to give like my personal view, and then I'll talk clinically. Okay. My personal view, if you, and look, don't go down this rabbit hole, because you can't undo awareness. Okay. So, if you're going to be disturbed by this, if you're going to be mad, then just don't investigate what I'm about to say. I do not think it is possible to untangle pornography from the sex trade and human trafficking. I don't think it's possible. I think those industries are so bound together that if you are a consumer of pornography, you are participating in human trafficking and the sex trade. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that it's the equivalent of you being the coyote smuggling across the border. Okay. So I'm not unreasonable in that way, but I'm just saying, like, to me, there's a real moral issue there. Okay. That's me personally. All right. If you want to know more about that, look into an organization called Culture Reframed. Totally secular feminist sociologists done all this research on this. Okay, let's talk clinically though. If I'm talking with clients of mine, I'm not going to impose my morality on them. So here's the deal. What's the agreement within your coupleship? That's what it comes down to. You have the right to choose. You have the right to choose if you're going to be in relationship, in an exclusive monogamous relationship with someone who uses pornography or not. That's your right, and you get to choose if you would rather look at pornography or be with a partner who says, I don't want to be in relationship with someone that looks at pornography. Everybody has choices here. You may not like the choices that are in front of you, but that's reality. Everybody gets to make choices. So that's how I approach this with couples. She's saying, not she specifically, just to clarify, the listeners, I'm not talking about Paige specifically, but the hypothetical clients in front of me, I might say, she is saying that she is not cool continuing in this relationship if you continue to look at pornography. Ball's in your court, buddy. Which do you choose, porn or her?
Yeah, so it's
about values. It's about what you value.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It seems like, okay, maybe this is just my circle of friends, but it was kind of assumed that every one of my friends dabbled in porn, right? Mm-hmm. Are couples just not having these discussions? Is this something that it's just taboo? They're not talking about this when they first start dating? Because it's like this stuff comes out 4 years into marriage.
Right.
Yeah. So, no, the conversations aren't happening, and when they are happening, they're beating all around the bush. They're not being real direct, and they're not being very thorough. And then on top of that, they're lying. Okay, so people are minimizing their usage. So they'll admit it, but maybe they look 3 times a week and they say, a couple times a year or something like that. Well, that's a very different scenario.
Yeah.
That's a very different scenario. And so then, 4 years later, someone stumbles upon their partner's internet history and they're, oh my God, you're doing this, several times a week in the middle of the night. And listen, it's not the pornography use that is the issue at that point. It's, you lied to me. We talked about this and you withheld reality from me. And that's kind of going a whole different direction than I'm sure we'll go at some point. But to go back to your question, no, couples, 1, they're not talking about it. 2, when they do, it's not very effective. And 3, they lie.
Yeah. It's the lying.
It's the lying.
It's the lying.
Very similar
That's
to
the problem.
substance use too. It's
right.
the lying.
Yeah. We focus on the behaviors and it's the lying that affects us. It's not necessarily the fact that they're drinking or using. It's the fact that they're lying about things.
Yeah.
And
it's the same.
And that'll beautifully open up a conversation on betrayal trauma. But I want to ask another question about pornography and the latest studies that have come out on pornography and its effect on the brain, its effect on the brain's reward system, and how bad this stuff really is for us.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
from a biological standpoint and how it can rewire the brain. Talk about some of that, some of the latest information on porn that might shock people.
Yeah. So, I mean, we see the brain on pornography light up similar to it would on cocaine. I mean, same neural pathways, same structures are lighting up. Now, everyone who does a single snort of cocaine is not going to become a cocaine addict, okay? But some will. And it's the same with pornography. And if we want to, and then you can go down the rabbit trail of when did first exposure happen, right? Because an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old brain is not prepared for the super stimulus of high-speed internet pornography. Is not prepared. It's just, it is not, that brain will be broken. Now, I'm not saying it can't be healed, but it will break that brain momentarily.
But the average age, I think, of exposure is about 11, is it not?
Oh, yeah, about 11. About 11 for boys, I think, and a little bit older for girls, so something like that. But yeah, absolutely, which is why, parents need to be having these conversations ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
What you do when you see it, and you're not in trouble for seeing it and all that. That's a whole other topic we could go down. But yeah, their little brains, our brains at that stage of development, they're just not prepared. And here's the other thing. So let's say you've got, and this is so sad to me. Let's say you've got someone who's like mid to late 20s right now, a guy, mid to late 20s. And for the last 15 years, 10, 15 years, his sexual development has been largely digital. Right? So porn, and if not porn, swapping pics with his girlfriend, this, that, the other. It is shocking how many of these guys cannot now hold an erection with an actual flesh and blood person in front of them. Because when you activate your sexual system and you act sexually, it also activates your attachment system. And especially in those adolescent years that are so formative. So now what is my attachment system attaching to? Well, it's a combination of my self-stimulation and this digital avatar that I can create to my own likings. There's no integration of, and this is going to get a little graphic for just a second, but smells and tastes and flesh to flesh experience integrated into the development of my arousal template. You give me a 65-year-old with porn-induced ED and a 25-year-old with porn-induced ED, the 65-year-old will recover much, much faster because there's foundational neurobiological sexual development with real people.
Wow.
Versus the 25-year-old.
Wow. Yeah.
It just goes to show how these early experiences can truly set you up for life. And then
Absolutely.
You're going to have to undo so much. And if it's even
Absolutely.
possible, and I've heard the accounts of sex addicts, guys, of their testimony about what it's like recovering. And some will mention things like that. Like, yeah, I can't hold an erection. Like I like women from the screen, but not so much in real life. And this may be for another discussion, but I think that there's a digital avatar that we all hold in our mind of even our partners sometimes. Like we have textual attraction, but not sexual attraction. You can be someone else behind the phone screen. And it's almost like technology, for as beneficial as has been so detrimental to us when it comes to attaching to people. And the way we communicate and the way that we love and we show intimacy. It's insane. It's insane to me how damaging this can be. So last question on just kind of setting the stage for sex addiction. Addiction in general, I think that there's a conception out there that a lot of it, I would say all addicts have some kind of trauma in their past that leads them to this place in their life. And I've been working with people and helping them recover for the last decade plus. I spend 3 to 4 nights a week at a treatment center volunteering time. And I know some people that have been through some really traumatic experiences. But I also know some people that tell me it's no more complicated than I just love an altered state of mind. I like it. I had a great childhood and I had amazing parents. They never put their hand on me. I was never susceptible to any kind of abuse. I love to get high. Mm-hmm. When it comes to sex addiction, do you see more of these traumatic experiences that lead someone there, whether it be their sexual abuse in their past or something that's happened along the lines that have led them here.
Yes, I do. We do see that, and I'm actually pulling up a document. If I can do it really quickly, let's see.
By all means.
Let's see here. No, it's not. That's okay. I'll go off my memory. So this is a little bit of an older study, something called The Making of a Sex Addict. Patrick Carnes, who's a real big name in the sex addiction field, kind of a pioneer in the diagnosis and treatment of sex addiction. He looked at a huge sample of these were inpatient sex addict sample, all men in this sample. And the numbers in my mind are something like 97% experienced emotional neglect or abuse as children. Low 80s, I want to say, were sexually abused, and in the 70th percentile were experienced some form of physical abuse in their developmental years. So there is a super high co-occurrence between early trauma and sex addiction. My suspicion is that those people who just enjoy an altered state, their sex is not, generally speaking, what's going to get them to, if that's what you're looking for, a chemical is probably going to do it a lot faster and more effectively. With sex addiction, and this is true to some extent of most addictions, and people don't realize this consciously, but at some point, because of the way that adaptation level phenomenon where there's that progression where I need more to achieve the same high, I need to go further to achieve the same high. At some point, we quit chasing the high and we're just trying to outrun the withdrawal.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, and that's not even conscious for most people. I'm no longer pursuing pleasure. I'm trying to outrun pain, despair, shame, all sorts of affect dysregulation. And that's really pronounced with sex addiction. That's more developed.
We call it sex addiction, but it's technically considered a compulsive disorder, right?
Yeah, it kind of depends on who you ask and that kind of thing. And if you want to split the hairs between compulsion and addiction, and
right,
yes.
because like substance addiction, a disease, right? Disease. It changes the brain. It changes the structure of the brain or parts of the brain. Does sex addiction do the same?
Well, that is the big question, isn't it? I think it does. I don't think it does it in the exact same way that a chemical does. But, back Valerie, what was her name? I think her last name started with a V. Also, she was a British neuroscience researcher at Oxford. This has probably been 8 or 10 years ago when she was doing the fMRI studies of people looking at pornography. Again, seeing it light up the exact same way as cocaine, right? Repeated use is going to literally physically alter the neural substrates of the brain. And in the very same way, have that sort of hijacked dopaminergic reward system develop.
So we kind of hit on betrayal trauma earlier in talking about couples that have this confluence of values, right? Like we didn't really discuss it going into our relationship when we started dating, but I look at porn X amount of times a week. I've told you something different. You don't like porn. You hate the sight of it. You think it's disgusting, but we've never really spent too much time talking about it. And then you discover that your loved one is looking at pornography on a regular basis, or that they're using escorts, or that they've been unfaithful, whatever it might be. It's not so much the act. It's not just the act or that they were looking at pornography. It's the way that it affects you in your memory and your filing cabinet of your memories of this person. And so let's get into betrayal trauma. I think this is where our two worlds intersect absolutely. Like I was a closet addict, and she had no idea that I was using for years and years and years and years. She thought she just married an asshole at some point. Like, this guy's wild, Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
What is going on? So what is betrayal trauma?
Right. So betrayal trauma is what happens when hidden, and that's a big part of this, when a hidden betrayal is discovered, and it sends the brain into a state of overwhelm because of the implications of what's been discovered. Okay? And trauma happens when the brain has to face too much too fast. That's one way that trauma happens. It can also be too little for too long, right? But too much too fast. And we are wired, this gets a little bit complex. So a piece of understanding betrayal trauma is understanding that human beings are wired so that the security of our most important relationships is fundamental to our sense of safety and identity. Okay? So part of what makes me feel safe is knowing I'm okay with my wife. I'm okay with my parents, my family, my kids, whatever, right? The security in those relationships gives me a sense of stability, right? And also a sense of identity, who I am. Okay, those are related. So when I discover that this relationship that is so fundamental to my sense of identity and well-being is not what I thought it was, when I discover that, it sends me into a state of crisis. And it's a crisis both like your brain is registering it as a survival issue, like a life and death survival issue. Okay? That's how important these relationships are to us. And then not only is it a survival issue, it's an existential crisis as well. Now, the existential part usually comes a little bit later, because at first it's like, wait a minute, is this happening right now? When's the last time? What is it? You're right, like, but what? Just trying to get the extent of it. But then it's like, okay, well, what does it mean that this happened? What does it mean about who you are, about who I am, about who we are, who I am to you? And those questions will derail a life.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Paige sees it all the time. I mean, you went through the very same thing.
Yes, I did. Yeah, and there's a lot of complex PTSD that goes along with it as well, because you're still being lied to over and over again, and that can do a number on you as well.
Yeah, layering again, one lie on another, and the betrayal is over time and from multiple angles, and it's and it doesn't necessarily fit neatly into sexual betrayal, for example. There could have been financial betrayal along with that. There could have been emotional betrayal along with that, right? Betrayal of values, a sense of spiritual betrayal along with that. And so it becomes very complex, multifaceted.
So the lying and the deceit is oftentimes more harmful than the act itself.
Yeah, so both are harmful, right? Both are harmful, but typically, I'm not going to say, I'm someone who's really opposed to always and never statements.
Yes.
Yeah. So the vast majority of the time, in the long run, it is the lying that does and has done the most damage. Now, initially, when partners are just trying to wrap their minds around it, they're very concerned about what happened. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But as those gaps get filled in, then the lingering damage is usually around the deception. Yeah, the gaslighting.
Yeah, I mean, when you discover something like this, it's almost like when this happens, I now have to put in or call into question my ability to judge character and my ability to determine what I'm seeing. Like, am I even looking at reality?
Yeah.
You can't trust yourself anymore. Like, you haven't just broken the trust between us. I can't trust myself anymore.
Absolutely, and it gets worse than that, because many of the partners that betrayed partners that I've worked with, they say something like this: there were these moments when I felt like something was off. I thought something was wrong. I came to you. I asked you. You assured me it's nothing. Oh, it's work stress. Oh, it's this, it's that, the other. And I chose to believe you over my own gut. So not only did you betray me, but I also have betrayed myself, because I didn't listen to my own gut in this. And so there's a feeling of self-betrayal as well.
What can this do to a person long term?
Oh, it make people crazy. I mean, it will. It'll make people crazy. And I have seen people who have lived for decades in this dynamic, and they are usually the ones. So let me just paint a picture for you, like create a scenario. Say there's a man and a woman. They've been married 35, 40 years. They have adult kids, maybe even a couple of grandkids at this point. Okay. And the whole time there's been deception and, hidden betrayal, gaslighting. The wife, and say the wife is the one who's being lied to. She's been like, something's off, something's wrong. And she keeps asking and being told nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. But she still feels like something's wrong. Okay? Well, she starts to react to this incongruence between what's happening around her and what her gut is telling her she knows is, that something's off. And it starts coming out, and she's impatient with her husband. She's hypercritical of her husband. She calls out every single thing that she does. Now, this is all a consequence of something is off, and she is trying to figure it out, and her spidey senses are, telling her, and her brain is just reacting, trying to make sense of it. For him, he's like, see, she really is a nag. I really can't tell her. I really couldn't. And he's confusing cause and effect. Right? So really his hidden deception is the cause of her symptoms, but he's saying her behaviors are the cause, justifying his behaviors. But what do the kids see? Mom is always on dad's back. Mom is so hard to get along with. Mom blows up at every moment. She loses it during holidays, this, that, the other. And mom becomes the bad guy, the scapegoat in the family system. Mm-hmm. But all of her behaviors are understandable in the context of someone who's just been severely gaslit, and they're just trying to find some stable ground to get their feet on.
That's probably the most validating thing any of our listeners could hear 100%. Right now. I mean, 100%, because they feel crazy. And you're right. I've come across more addicted people than I can count that have more complaints about their wife than they can stand. And I just sit there and I listen. I let them talk, and I let them talk, and I let them talk. And you kind of back them into it. And it's like, let's talk about where this came from for a moment, pal. And they figure it out over time. But many people don't see this when they're in it. No, they just don't. It's almost like it requires some therapy or a professional to sit down with you and talk to you about it. And so you can really uncover it. But you're absolutely right. It's the behaviors leading up to that cause the stuff that you have the most annoyance with. Like I've said before, like any of the issues that I had with her were as a result of my behaviors that put her in a position to act that way.
Push me to the edge.
Right. Yeah.
100%. But when you're in active addiction, whatever the addiction is, when you're in active addiction, you are operating in a false reality.
Yes.
You've got this little closed loop of reality that is self-confirming, right? There's a self-confirmation bias in there in which you're confusing cause and effect. You've got all your little cognitive distortions that perpetuate it and keep it going. And you're sure that you're right and everyone else is wrong, right? And you can't see a different way until you're outside of it and you're like, oh my gosh,
look at that.
How did I ever believe that? Oh my gosh, right? That's also why partners of addicts often, they're like, I just don't get it. I can't wrap my mind around it. How could someone do that? Well, you're right. No shade on you for not being an addict. You'll never fully understand what it's like to be inside that little closed circuit false reality. But that's
and this is why. This is why, and I tell everyone, you can't just tell her. It's usually her, right? So I know let's go ahead and what are the split stats on this? I know for substance users, it's roughly 75% are men. What about for sex addicts?
Those numbers are shifting right now for a lot of different reasons. I've seen actually around the same percentage split, 75, 80% male. But the number of female sex addicts and the prevalence of sex addiction among females is rising. One, I do think there are cultural changes that are leading that, but also we're more aware of ways it manifests in women that we used to not consider. For example, erotic novels. A lot of female sex addicts are addicted to erotica, but we never used to ask about that. We would just ask about porn, and they'd say no. Well, it's written porn, essentially. So we're getting more aware of how it shows up in both genders.
Okay. That's essentially why, though, I kind of back into your conversation there, why you can't just tell someone, like, I've come home from treatment, I spent 30 days away or whatever it might be, or I've been going to counseling now for 30 days, and I come home and I say, can we just move on? Just forget the past. Oh. This is why we can't forget the past. It's because of this. It's this right here. Yeah.
It's you absolutely cannot. And here's my silly analogy here. So let's say you're in business with someone, your best friend. You and your best friend go into business together, and for 10 years you have this company, and it's pretty successful. There's struggles along the way, something does always seem a little off, like I can't quite get ahead, all this. Anyway, 10 years later, you discover that your best friend and partner has been embezzling from the business, stealing from you the whole time. And the partner's like, you're right. I shouldn't have done it. I'm wrong. I'll tell you everything. And they tell you everything, sort of, but they don't want to talk about it anymore, and they want to continue doing business with you. How's that going to go over?
Not well.
No.
Not well. Like, if there's any chance I keep doing business with you, we're going to talk about this a lot.
All the time. Every transaction.
And you can bet there's going to be transparency that wasn't there before. There are going to be checks and balances that wasn't. And we're just talking about a business, much less a marriage.
Right.
So when guys come back, or ladies, guys come back from treatment and they're like, hey, I'm good now, but talking about that stuff brings up my shame, and that's not good for me in my recovery. Bullshit.
That's what I'm saying.
Am I allowed to say that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Emphasis on the
yes,
shit.
Please.
Yeah, like, no way. No, that's not going to fly. Not if you want this relationship to continue.
Damn right.
Yes.
I see that so much from 12-step communities and from LCDCs, and I don't think they're actually saying it, but a lot of time addicted people love to interpret what a therapist says for their own narrative, if you will.
Yeah.
And
to remove that shame.
They will tell someone, and I've actually seen LCDCs tell families that you can't bring this stuff up because it causes shame, and if he gets into shame,
it might trigger the
relapse. And it's like everyone is so focused on what the addicted person needs. What do we need to keep them right? It's always about the addict, right? It's seldom about the partners.
Ooh. Speaking my language here. Yeah, I mean, I'll get fired up on this.
Let's go.
What a recovering addict, and I'm speaking as one.
Same.
I didn't need people to tiptoe around my shame.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Okay? I needed to walk through my shame and essentially have a new sense of identity. Okay? And that's not going to happen through avoidance of talking about the hard things or the things that cause me shame. That is not going to happen. That is not actually what's best for that person. Okay? It's not. And I'm a grateful recovering addict who used the 12-step community, and I love the 12 steps for many, many reasons, but the 12 steps is not the be-all, end-all. And I can remember, I remember in my own recovery, so I conceptualize of like 3 levels of relationship health. Level 1 is basically codependence, where it's like, you're an extension of me, or I'm an extension of you. You exist for my good, my pleasure. I exist for yours. And maybe we even take turns at it. It's your turn for a while, my turn for a while. But that's where I'm going to lie to you if you're not going to serve my purpose. That's active addiction is operating at level 1. Okay. I'm going to treat you like an object, an extension of me that I can bring in or push out to my reality. Okay. 12-step programs are really good at helping people move from level 1 to what I call level 2. Level 2 says, I'm responsible for me. You're responsible for you. You can make it sound like a Hallmark card. You take care of you for me. I take care, or I take care of me for you. You take care of you for me, right? Right. And it's that whole, you can't make me angry. I'm responsible for my feelings. You're responsible for yours. And that's called individuation. And it feels so much better than level 1 that people are like, we've arrived. We've arrived. I remember when I moved there, when that paradigm shift happened in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, they can't make me angry. I'm responsible for my feelings. It's like, yes.
It is
like that.
revolutionary at the time.
It is. And I just want to say to couples like, don't stop there. But
Let's
wait,
go.
there's more. There's
Yes.
more, because level 3 says, you know what? I can take care of myself and my partner at the same time. I can't make my partner feel a certain way, but I have to own the reality that how I shows up influences my partner, and I'm going to steward that influence well. So this is the difference between my wife gets triggered about something and I say, hey, that's your stuff. You need to go talk to your people about that. I'm in my integrity. I know I didn't do anything wrong there. That's yours, not mine. Okay?
Yeah.
Which that's where a lot of 12-step will
That's
get
where
you.
that's where they live most of the time.
That's where they live, versus, oh my God, I would never want you to feel that. Talk to me more about that. How could, share with me. If I love my wife, look, my wife's got wounds that predate our relationship.
Sure.
What, I want to be like, oh, not my fault I stepped in it. That one was there before me. Or do I want to know where they are? 1, try to be sensitive to them. And 2, when I accidentally step in it, be a part of helping her feel better.
Right.
Because
Especially if
that-
those wounds
Validation.
were from us, right? Like if those
Right.
wounds were as a product of my own behavior.
And it's not just better for my partner, it's better for me.
I've always said that.
I'm more grown up. I'm more the man I want to be when I act that way.
100%. 100%. Yeah, it runs rampant in I think 12-step lingo, just kind of the vernacular that runs around with it. It's like you can't, and I think everyone who's been in it for a while goes through that phase. We went through that too, where it's like, I can't cause you to feel any way.
Oh yeah. You went through that in very early recovery.
Yeah.
But-
Stay on your side of the street.
Yeah,
Don't manage my recovery.
It's like, we're married, y'all. Like,
Right.
that has use
There's a
common
gray
sense.
area here. There's definitely a gray area where you can be there to validate your partner and be there. This is your most intimate partner. You're supposed to feel
100%.
safe. You need to be able to talk about things. It's not just me and just you.
Well, and let's talk about why 12-step programs work, because there's been a lot of studies on this. And if you look at the meta-analyses where they take, they do studies of multiple studies and they try to find these common factors. What makes 12-step programs work? 2 things. Number 1 is that you're totally honest with whether it's your sponsor, your home group, or your small tight circle of that there becomes a person or group of people with whom you are rigorously, radically honest, and they know everything. Okay, that's number 1. Why is that important? Well, I can't really get in reality until other people know my reality too.
Right.
And help me stay there. Okay, that's number 1. And then number 2 is that, and here's the 12-step lingo, that you actually work the program. So just showing up to meetings won't do it. Right? You have to do the meetings, you have to have the sponsor, you have to do the step work, you have to do the service work. And what is that really about? Is it because there's something magical about the 12 steps or, circling up? No. Here's what it is. Here's another way they say it in the 12 steps. You got to put your program first. They read it in the chapter, how it works. How it works, right? Commit themselves fully to our simple program of recovery. Mm-hmm. What are you saying there? What you're saying there is, I'm going to stop doing it my way. I'm going to submit myself. I'm going to see myself inside of this larger thing, and I'm going to understand that my good My good is going to be found when I submit myself to this larger thing that is beyond me, and I'm going to do it this way. So I'm not the survival unit anymore. My survival is now knit to this thing right here. So two things, total honesty and submitting yourself to something larger than yourself. Well, what would happen if instead of doing that with some guys that you might see a couple times a week in a 12-step meeting, you did that with the person you share a bed with? I tell you everything, and I'm going to put this relationship first, and I'm going to understand that I never have to choose between what's best for me and my marriage, because if it's bad for my marriage, it's bad for me. I believe that my best shot at not just surviving, but thriving and flourishing in this life is in my marriage. I'm really saying this now. Jake the human being. Like, being in my marriage with my wife is the best thing for me. That is the best case scenario for me. So I never have to choose between my marriage and myself. Because if it hurts my marriage, it hurts me. And so we're going to put the marriage first, and we're going to tell each other everything. That's why 12-step programs work.
Yeah.
Just do it in your marriage.
So,
Yes.
so my best friend is a therapist, which is always fun. And he was talking to me about, he was like, the reason that therapy works, or when it's effective, it's about rapport with the counselor, whoever that might be. I can trust you. I can be open to you. And then it's the investment that the client has in the therapeutic process, which is, once again, I'm going to do what's prescribed. I'm going to do something different. It's really simple when it all distills. It's, I'm committed to this. I'm willing to follow it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why it works.
That's why it works. That is why it works. I feel safe and comfortable with you. And here's another way of saying it. If I'm the client, I believe that you believe you can help me.
100%. Mm-hmm. That's what it's about. That's what it's about. So we've talked about couples that have worked through this, like we worked through this, and you've basically outlined exactly how we've done it in a much more eloquent and precise way. But what about for people that don't get that? Let's say couples that have split up. And when it comes to betrayal trauma, especially, like I have made, like 12-step lingo, amends, right? I have changed, for lack of a better term, over the years. I'm a different person today. I carry myself differently. I'm more honest, or completely honest anyway, with her. And there's full transparency. She can live with that, I think, because there has been an apology. There's also been a follow through with changed behaviors. What about people that don't ever get that? How do you heal from betrayal trauma when that person has left you, or the relationship is too broken to try to fix? How does someone deal with that? Like our listeners, primarily women that have dealt with these relationships, what are they to do?
Yeah. So it's a process of grief at that point. Okay. Whether you stay in the relationship or not. So the first step is safety and stability. Okay, to heal from trauma, safety and stability is the first phase. If you're staying in the relationship, part of getting safe and stable is knowing what happened. So we do a process called full therapeutic disclosure, and we use polygraph, and we help that betrayed partner really know they know everything.
The whole truth.
The whole truth. All their questions answered, all of it. Okay? Now, if you don't get that, what's your reality? Your reality is you're not going to get that. Now that's tough. Like even as I say those words in this moment, I feel a sinking in my stomach for people in that situation.
Right.
But that is reality. And we have to start with accepting our reality so that we can make choices based on our reality. And choices lead to empowerment and healing. Okay, so the order is reality, choices, empowerment, and healing. And so when I go, okay, I'm not going to know, and I go, that this is going to be part of my story, that I don't get all the data. I have these little pockets. Now I shift to, what does that mean? And if you're in this situation that we're describing right now and you hear nothing else I say today, hear these next couple sentences. It is not what happened to you that will define you. It is the story you tell yourself about what happened to you. Okay? It's not your story that sets your trajectory for your life. It's the story you tell yourself about your story. That will set the trajectory for your life. So if you say, because I won't ever know, therefore I'll never heal, well, that is exactly what will happen. But if you say, I will never know, but I will not let that define me. I will not let my feelings of pain and anger, fear, I'm not going to ignore them, but I'm not going to be limited by them either. I'm not going to let the presence of those feelings about what has happened keep me from also feeling joy or love. And that might start with loving that morning cup of coffee, or loving, the bird feeder in the backyard, or something like that. That's fine. But you are choosing to make meaning on purpose of what happened. That's grief. Grief is essentially a meaning-making process. What does it mean to me that this has happened? And it's hard, and you oscillate in and out of, pain, and then you have a better day, and then you're grateful he's gone or she's gone, and then you miss them again, and that's just part of it. But you don't have to be defined by it when you decide, I'm going to grieve on purpose. I'm going to decide what this means for my life.
There's almost shades of like victim mindset versus survivor mindset to this in some way too, right?
100%. 100%. So there's a duality here. I do believe betrayed partners are victims of hidden betrayal. I don't believe betrayed partners have to identify as victims because they've been betrayed. And there's a huge difference there. Huge difference there. Right. So a victim mentality, we could spend a lot of time on this, but victim mentality, there's an external locus of control, right? Mm-hmm. So something outside of myself is making me be in this place. If he would only do this, if she would just do that, if she wouldn't do that, if he wouldn't, right? Or they ought to, they should. And what I say is, yeah, maybe they should. Maybe in a purely just world, they should do that. But if they're not, what will you do? And I want to validate how unfair this is.
It is, yeah.
Right.
It's super unfair.
Yeah.
But and you may not like the choices in front of you, but there's only one way I know of. If you don't like the choices in front of you, there's only one way I know of to get to a place where you do start liking the choices available to you. And that is, you start with the choices that are available to you, whether you like them or not.
What are my options in front of me?
Yeah.
Right.
And I have to start. It's reality, then choices, then empowerment and healing.
Yeah. Hope can be such a beautiful thing that carries people. If hope didn't exist, I wouldn't be alive today. I'm sure that you would be in a vastly different place in your life as well. And Paige as well. But it can also be an incredibly damaging thing whenever your hope becomes so singular on one outcome, which is we're going to get better. We're going to be like that two-faux couple. We're going to be happy and everything's going to be better. And then something happens along the way because I've often said, as much as we sit up here every week and talk about addiction recovery and what it's like to recover as a couple from betrayal and everything else, it was more up to me than it was her. Her role in this was patience, forgiveness, empathy, understanding. My role was a shitload of work to completely rewire everything about myself. And it was so much more contingent on me doing the work than it was her. But spouses would do it for them if they could. They are desperate for that outcome. So when it comes to reframing hope for people, is there anything you could say to inspire someone to reframe hope about what your life could look like, even if you don't get the outcome that you want?
Yeah. I think, I think, here's what I would say. And some people are going to disagree with me. That's fine. Everyone has the right to, disagree and be wrong. So, there's this idea of I've got to figure out the real me. Okay, and a lot of people early in recovery do this. They, oh, I don't even know who I am. I've got to go find the real me. I'm going to call bullshit again. You don't find the real you. You decide who you want to be, and then you work to become that person. Okay? There's not some real me like hidden inside, and I'm going to do a bunch of navel gazing, and one day, I found myself. Like that sounds nice, but it's not how it works. My doctoral degree is in the area of human development. Okay, I actually have a doctorate in education because I wanted to study human development, which is often in the School of Education. So how do humans develop? Well, by what you do, and what you do affects how you think and how you feel, and the stories you tell yourself about yourself, and so I need to decide who I want to be, and then moment by moment choose to act in a way that I am being and becoming that person. How does that connect with hope? Well, you get to decide who you're going to be.
Reframe hope.
I love that.
I mean, is it like unlimited? Like at 42 years old, now am I going to decide I'd like to be, an NFL, running back? Probably not. Is it too late for me to become, a concert pianist? Probably so. It's probably too late for that. But I guarantee you I can become a more humble person. I can become a more courageous person.
Adventurous.
Curious.
I mean,
yes. Yeah.
So many things.
So many things. Yeah, I'm not limited there. I get to be that person.
I think that's such a beautiful way to look at it too. But culturally, I think that, and I think that marriage is a beautiful thing. It has worked very well for both of us. Don't get me wrong, but I think that so many people have been told, and it's sort of ingrained in us and conditioned, that you can only be happy if you're married. You can only be happy if you're married. A co-parenting thing will just not do. And so many people try to shove this square peg into this round hole for years and years and years and years. And let's say that you are with someone, substance user or sex addict, doesn't matter. We'll just use the word addict generally here. And you have tried to force that square peg into that round hole, and they are not willing to change or willing to see your perspective. You've got a healthy outlook of what you would like things to look like. Is there further damage you can do to your psyche? Like it almost seems to me like you are almost voluntarily setting yourself up for further betrayal. You know what I mean? Like the story you tell yourself about your relationship versus the reality of your relationship. Yeah, for sure. People have far more choices than they think they do. It's convenient to not see the choices we have. Let me say it this way. So back in the days when I was a pastor, okay, I'd meet with people, married people, and they'd say, well, I can't get divorced. I'd be like, well, why not? They say, well, we are in a covenant together. Okay. Here's my take on that. If you're in a covenant or a promise or whatever, whatever word you want to use there, what makes that covenant meaningful is not that you can't walk away from it. It's the fact that you could walk away from it and you choose not to. Okay? I like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have a right? Like my wife has committed to me. It's not like, oh, now I got her.
Right.
For good.
Right?
She's in the bag, man.
Yeah. She's in the bag. Or now, or the flip side of that, well, now I made a covenant to her, so now she's the old ball and chain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. How degrading is that to both of us?
Right.
Every single day, I get to choose to honor that commitment or not. And here's, again, taking my take one step further. And if there's been hidden betrayal, there's been deception, there's been infidelity, right? That person has already chosen to break that covenant. If I'm the betrayed partner, I get to set the terms for reentry if they're going to be there at all. That's a matter of justice in my book. If you come and work with me, understand that's a foundational principle. Justice demands that the betrayed partner gets to set the terms for reentry to the relationship. And buddy, you can get on board or not.
Yeah.
Your choice.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so many people. Addicts love to weaponize those vows.
Oh, yeah.
You
see
said
it all
in
the time.
sickness and in health, and I'm sick.
So so then get well.
Get well. Damn right.
We all have choices.
You know,
There are options.
addiction is a disease, right? Yeah, I'm not going to argue with scientists, but for why it's a disease is a different conversation. The parts of the brain that change, but so many people look at it like cancer, right? Cancer doesn't operate independent of my choices. Now, maybe what brought that cancer on could, right? But my choices can. What I'm saying is recovery is a choice.
Yeah.
Addiction is a process, if you're recovered, which is bookended by choices. At some point, I made a choice to use for the very first time. I made another choice, another choice, another choice. And before you know it, my brain's working against me and it's hard to get out. But then we make a choice to recover. We do. We make a choice. It is bookended by choices. So I don't think it's as nuanced to say I think it's hopeless to say it's a disease and there's just no way out.
Yeah. I teach at a higher education institution in their doctoral program. I teach professional counselors addiction treatment. And the way I explain it is, it's like, and I have my little object lesson here. For those of you listening, I'm holding up a black paperweight diamond and turning it, and you can see all these different facets. And there are all these different models of addiction. Addiction is a disease. Addiction is
choice.
The choice. There are all these different models for what addiction is. And every single one of them gives us some insight into what it is. But no one model captures the entire phenomenon of addiction.
The truth is shared.
Exactly. And so, there are things to learn looking at it through that lens of disease. But if that's your be-all, end-all idea of what addiction is, it's not a full reality. It's not a full reality. And mental health is a commitment to reality at all costs. That was Scott Peck from The Road Less Traveled.
It's a bumper sticker is what that is.
It's a good one. It's one of my favorite quotes. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Let's talk just as we close this out. I think I could talk to you for 5 hours.
I know,
this
right?
is just wonderful conversation. I think
Just bring me back another time. I'd love to.
We will 100%. I will promise you that. And the guests, and the listeners, I mean. Let's talk about the role of empathy in healing.
Okay.
So why is empathy from the betrayer critical to healing? If you are going to go down this path and you want to fix this, why is empathy so important?
Yeah. So there are a couple of reasons why. One reason is empathy. When there's been an attachment wound, empathy is a critical ingredient in the healing of that relational wound. Okay. If we're friends and you hurt me really badly somehow, and I know you love me, I believe you love me, but I don't believe that you really understand how you hurt me, I'm still not going to trust you. But if I can believe that you love me and you understand how you hurt me, there's some basis for me to start beginning to rebuild some trust with you. And empathy communicates to me that you understand how you hurt me. Empathy is an exchange of emotion. So you don't just understand it cognitively,
right,
but there's like this affective right brain to right brain, nervous system to nervous system attunement of like, I hurt you and I feel how much I hurt you in such a way that you feel felt by me. And there's lots of research out there that shows that when there's an attachment wound, when the person wounded feels felt by the wounder, that is an important, profound moment of healing. Okay? So that's one reason why. Another reason why is that the development of empathy is likely going to be necessary, not just for that moment of healing and attunement, but to create a stable and safe relational environment for the long-term healing of that wound, right? So it's like if, God forbid, I'm in a car accident on the way home today and I get some gash in my body or whatever, and I'm in the hospital a couple of days, they stitch me up, stop the bleed internally, stitch me up, stabilize me, send me home. There's two parallel tracks of healing that have to happen there. One is like, apply this salve to the wound. That's the direct healing. That's that feeling felt by that, and empathy is so crucial in that. But the other thing that needs to happen for that wound to heal is I need to stay off the roof, cleaning out the gutters. It's probably not time to put up the Christmas lights. I'm not going to pull up the dead crepe myrtle in the backyard, right? There needs to be an environment conducive to the healing of the wound. And if you don't have empathy, capacity for empathy, you're not going to be able to anticipate how you're going to show up in ways that start ripping that wound open.
The self-awareness it takes, right?
Self-awareness, that's right. And it helps me grow out of the selfishness inherent in so many addictions. So long term, I'm going to be better set up for this relationship, to be a safe person in this relationship, and to not go back to my old ways through the development of empathy.
What's the difference between, so you mentioned some of the actual, like the neuroscience behind empathy, like the mirror neuron system at work, understanding how you felt, and I'm feeling the very same thing, versus sympathy. And so when it comes to addiction, it's not always just the substance. A lot of times there are abusive behaviors that are taking place as well. And there's not a hell of a lot of empathy for the betrayed partner, for the spouse, whoever it might be, or just the partner. What's the difference between someone who is showing sympathy versus someone who truly understands empathy? And is everyone capable of it?
Yeah. Okay. Great questions. So some people approach this in a very all or nothing way, empathy good, sympathy bad. That's not what the research actually shows. There's a place for both, okay? But the difference is important. Sympathy means I feel for you, right? So I feel compassion for you. I feel pity, and not even necessarily like in a bad, demeaning way, but like I feel sorry for you. I'm hurting for you. That's sympathy. And there's a place for that. Empathy, though, is I feel with you. Okay? I enter into your experience. So there's this psychological distance built into sympathy. Empathy closes that psychological gap. And so a lot of the folks I work with who are on the addicted side or the betraying side, it's like they can do the sympathy thing, but when they try to show empathy, it immediately brings up their shame because it's too much. It's too intense. And you'll never be able to get to empathy if you have out of control shame. Why? Shame, what am I doing with shame? Instead of feeling with you, I take my judgment about myself. I'm terrible. I'm awful. I'm no good. I'm bad. I project it onto you as your judgment of me. So where are my eyes? On myself.
Right.
So shame, I'm projecting onto you and turning it back on me, and now you're left over there sharing all your emotion, isolated, alone, alienated. Your hurt's getting dropped by me again. No space for your pain again. Left alone with your pain again. So with empathy, I've got to close the gap psychologically, resist the shame that would come up, and really hold that space with you, sit with you. And it's hard to do. Now, can anybody do it? Yes and no. There are a few people where there are some neurodiversity issues. There could be damage to certain parts of the brain, some traumatic brain injuries, that kind of thing, that could severely impair certain types of empathy. So there's two types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy and what I refer to as affective empathy. So some people with certain neurodiversity markers or certain differences in their brain, they might be able to do the cognitive empathy where they reason their way to understanding your emotion, but they may not actually attune. Okay? Beside that, though, I've seen lots of people grow in their skill and their capacity for empathy.
So it's a skill that can be developed, you're saying?
Absolutely, 100%.
So even for someone like a narcissist, like a clinical narcissist, right? Not just someone who's an asshole.
All right. Well, that's a big debate. I say yes. Some will disagree with me on this, but I have personally, I always, whenever I'm on podcasts, I'm always like, do I want to say this out loud? But I will.
Yes, you do.
Because I'll get a whole bunch of emails and phone calls. That's okay. I love working with narcissists. Wow. I love working with narcissists. Because of how rewarding it is when they get it. Because you leverage that narcissistic impulse and they'll become the best partners.
The best partner of all
the
time.
best. They'll become the most empathic people out there. And it's a really sweet thing. And I've seen it happen. Has it always worked with every narcissistic client I've ever worked with? Absolutely not. Are there limitations? Sure. Might there be extra obstacles and barriers? And yes, but can they learn to do it to some degree? Absolutely. Absolutely.
So where can people go to find out more about you and more about what you do?
Yeah. Well, I just had a book come out and I'm giving it away for free. So if you go to drjakeporter.com/breaking barriers, you can download my book for free. It's really small because people, don't like to read big books. And it's, it really outlines a model I developed called couple-centered recovery. So what I was saying earlier about why not take the stuff that works in 12-step and just apply it to your most important relationship in your life, apply it to your marriage. That's what couple-centered recovery does. It says, you know what, we're not going to make the relationship wait for 2 to 3 years until your individual recoveries, got a good, strong foundation to it. From the very beginning, let's put this relationship in the center of this process. And my claim is, by and large, you will heal faster, deeper that way. So folks can get that book for free, drjakeporter.com/breaking barriers. I've got a YouTube channel at Dr. Jake Porter, has tons, hours and hours and hours of free content. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Yeah.
Awesome.
And if they wanted to work with you one-on-one, how
sure.
would they do that?
So two ways to do that. So I have my clinic here, Daring Ventures. You can go to Daring Ventures, not Adventures, Daring Ventures, and not Dating Ventures. That's a different site too. DaringVentures.com, and you can learn about my team and I and the work we do. Now, I only work with couples in person in intensives. So you come, we do 6 hours a day together for 2 or 3 or 4 days in a row. People come from all over the world, and I love getting to do that. And you can go to daringventures.com/intensives to learn more about that. I also have a program, though, called Choose Connection Academy, and you can go to chooseconnectionacademy.com. And this is a hybrid online, there's hours and hours of videos and exercises you do, but also a weekly group coaching call with me where I help people apply it and answer their questions. And there's a gated community online. You can send me direct messages and be in this community. And we work with hundreds of couples there, and it's seen a lot of great results through that. It is expensive. There's different price points depending on all the options and all that, but it's designed to be cheaper than what it would cost to do 2 individual therapists and a couples therapist and group and all that. So chooseconnectionacademy.com.
I think that's wonderful. I think it's, and I hope people listen to that because there are so few resources for people in this space. Most of the time, they'll just tell you go to an Al-Anon meeting or a 12-step meeting, and there you go. Good luck.
That's it.
Good luck. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. You will no doubt be back.
Yeah.
I hope so.
So many other topics I would love to hit on that I've seen you cover online. So please go check out YouTube channels where I've digested tons and tons of content over the last month. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Paige.
Thank you.
All right, guests. Thank you for joining us, listeners. Until next time, I am Matt.
I'm Paige.
And we'll see you.
Bye.